Imagine losing over 40 million, not because of mismanagement, but because truck drivers aren't speaking English. That's the reality California is facing right now. The U.S. Department of Transportation has officially announced that it will withhold $40,685,025 in federal funding from the state after a federal investigation revealed massive gaps in enforcing English proficiency rules for commercial vehicle drivers. Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy didn't mince words. He said California has failed to comply with federal English language proficiency, or ELP, standards, rules designed to ensure that truck drivers can read road signs, understand traffic laws, and communicate effectively with law enforcement. The stakes aren't small. These rules exist to protect everyone on the road, from ordinary commuters to families driving on highways next to massive 80,000-pound trucks. The withheld funds aren't just numbers on a spreadsheet. They come from the Motor Carrier Safety Assistance Program, or MCSAP, which pays for critical roadside inspections, company safety audits, and public education campaigns. Without this money, law enforcement loses resources to enforce safety and prevent accidents, making this a story that hits far beyond Sacramento and the state government. But that's just the beginning. California isn't the only state warned about ELP compliance, but it's the only one currently refusing to enforce it. The consequences of inaction are real, and the tension between federal authority and state decision-making is only growing. And what happened next would shock many Americans, because the gaps in enforcement aren't just minor oversights. They're exposing serious risks on the road. To understand why this $40 million dispute is such a big deal, you need to know the history behind the English Language Proficiency, or ELP, rules. These regulations aren't new. They were created to make sure that every commercial vehicle driver on American roads can read, speak, and understand English well enough to operate safely. Think about it. A single misread road sign or misunderstood instruction could trigger a massive accident involving dozens of vehicles. The rules became particularly strict again in June 2025 after an executive order from former President Trump targeted several trucking industry issues. This EO made it clear that drivers who fail English proficiency assessments can be placed out of service, essentially taking them off the road until they meet the standards. Prior to this, a 2016 memo had discouraged enforcement, letting some drivers slip through the cracks. Now, federal inspectors are tasked with making sure states enforce these requirements consistently, but California has not been playing by the same rulebook. According to the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration, between June 25 and August 21, 2025, California conducted roughly 34,000 inspections that reported at least one violation. Shockingly, only one inspection involved an English proficiency violation that actually led to a driver being taken out of service. Meanwhile, at least 23 drivers who had previously failed ELP checks in other states were later inspected in California and allowed to keep driving. That's a massive loophole that federal authorities say puts public safety at risk. And it's not just about statistics or bureaucracy. Every truck on the road is a potential hazard if the driver can't communicate effectively in an emergency. Secretary Duffy emphasized that this is a fundamental safety issue affecting families and communities across California. The stakes are high, and the clock is ticking, because unless California complies, this $40 million in federal funds will remain frozen, directly affecting law enforcement and safety operations across the state. But the story doesn't end there. Next, we'll explore how California officials have responded to these warnings and why federal authorities say the state's inaction is unprecedented in the nation. California's reaction to the federal warnings has been tense, to say the least. Officials, including Governor Gavin Newsom, have not fully embraced the new English proficiency enforcement requirements, which has frustrated federal authorities. Secretary Duffy has publicly criticized the state, saying it is the only state in the nation refusing to ensure big rig drivers can read road signs and communicate with law enforcement. That's a bold statement, and it has sparked nationwide debate about state versus federal authority. Critics argue that California's reluctance isn't just a bureaucratic oversight, it's a direct threat to safety. Truck drivers carry massive loads, often over 80,000 pounds, navigating highways crowded with cars, pedestrians, and other vehicles. If a driver can't understand road signs, safety protocols, or emergency instructions, the results could be catastrophic. It's not hyperbole. Federal inspectors see these gaps as a risk to everyone on the road, from families commuting to school to delivery drivers and emergency responders. Governor Newsom's office has responded defensively, stating that California has a history of balancing safety regulations with industry flexibility. But critics see this as selective enforcement, leaving federal officials with no choice but to withhold the MCSAP funds. This $40 million isn't just a number. It's money that pays for roadside inspections, safety audits, and training for officers. By refusing compliance, California has tied the hands of local law enforcement, making it harder for them to maintain safe highways. And yet, while tensions rise in Sacramento and Washington, drivers and trucking companies are left in uncertainty. Who can legally operate? Who is at risk of being taken off the road? And how long can this standoff continue before safety is compromised? The next section will reveal the real-world consequences for both truckers and everyday motorists caught in the middle of this high-stakes conflict. The fallout from California's non-compliance is already being felt on the roads. Trucking companies face confusion over enforcement rules. Some drivers are being flagged in neighboring states for English proficiency issues that California has ignored. This inconsistency creates a ripple effect. Companies don't know which drivers are legally allowed to operate, and law enforcement is forced to make split-second decisions that could have life or death consequences. For commercial drivers, the stakes are even higher. Those who fail English proficiency assessments in other states risk being taken out of service. Yet in California, enforcement has been lax. Reports reveal that dozens of drivers with documented ELP violations in other states were allowed to keep driving once they entered California. Federal officials warn that this not only undermines safety, but also weakens the integrity of the national transportation system. Meanwhile, ordinary motorists face the invisible risks every time they share highways with trucks. Imagine a driver hauling tens of thousands of pounds who can't read warning signs or communicate in emergencies. The danger is real, and federal authorities are adamant that California must act to prevent preventable accidents. With the $40 million in MCSAP funds withheld, the state's resources for safety inspections, audits, and public education campaigns are severely limited, leaving both truckers and everyday drivers in a precarious position. And this conflict isn't just about money, it's about accountability. In the next section, we'll dive into the political tension, examining why California has resisted enforcement and what Washington's next moves could mean for the future of truck safety across the nation. The clash between California and the federal government has sparked heated political debate. Governor Newsom's administration argues that the state has unique challenges when it comes to enforcing English proficiency standards, citing the diversity of its workforce and logistical hurdles. Critics, however, see this as a refusal to follow federal law, with opponents accusing the state of putting political ideology above public safety. Federal Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy has made it clear that this isn't just a bureaucratic spat. He frames it as a matter of life and death on the highways. His message is pointed. California must enforce English proficiency for commercial drivers or lose critical funding that keeps inspections and safety programs running. For trucking companies and law enforcement alike, this creates a tense standoff. Will California comply, or will the standoff escalate, putting drivers and citizens at risk? Adding fuel to the fire, advocacy groups for commercial drivers are weighing in, arguing that uniform rules across all states are essential to prevent confusion and accidents. Meanwhile, some industry insiders warn that inconsistent enforcement could ripple across national supply chains, delaying deliveries and creating economic strain. With the clock ticking and $40 million in federal funds on the line, California faces a stark choice: align with federal standards or risk being cut off from essential highway safety resources. In the next section, we'll explore how other states have handled similar mandates, revealing what California could learn and what might happen if it continues to resist. Other states that faced similar English proficiency enforcement rules chose compliance, and the results have been telling. In Texas and Florida, for example, commercial drivers undergo mandatory language assessments during routine inspections. Drivers who fail are temporarily placed out of service, ensuring that only those who can understand road signs and law enforcement instructions remain on the roads. These measures haven't caused chaos. They've increased safety and reduced accidents involving miscommunication. California's refusal stands in stark contrast. While other states have aligned with federal rules, California remains the only state delaying enforcement. Critics argue this inconsistency not only endangers drivers, but also creates legal confusion for trucking companies operating across state lines. Truckers who pass in one state but fail in California could face conflicting regulations, raising questions about liability and road safety. Federal officials have warned that time is running out. If California doesn't act, the withheld $40 million won't just affect inspections. It could delay safety audits, slow public education campaigns, and put critical funding for roadside law enforcement at risk. Some lawmakers are calling for additional measures, suggesting that California's continued noncompliance might require legal intervention to protect public safety. And as the debate heats up, the stakes are higher than ever. This isn't just about funding. It's about ensuring every driver on America's highways can read, understand, and respond to life-saving instructions. Next, we'll dive into what California officials are saying in response, and why this showdown could have long-term effects on trucking and safety nationwide. California officials have pushed back against the federal warning, arguing that the state is already taking steps to improve driver training and language assessments, but critics say the measures are too slow and inconsistent. Governor Newsom's office claims that California's diverse workforce requires careful implementation to avoid unfairly penalizing drivers, but the USDOT insists that safety can't wait. The tension between federal and state authorities has sparked a heated debate. Trucking companies operating in California are caught in the middle, facing potential fines, confusion over compliance rules, and disruptions to deliveries. For drivers, this could mean more inspections, stricter language checks, and the very real possibility of being placed out of service if they fail to meet the English proficiency standards. Experts warn that if California continues to delay enforcement, the consequences could ripple far beyond the trucking industry. Road safety, federal funding for inspections, and even interstate commerce could be affected. The $40 million withholding is just the beginning. Federal officials have hinted that further action may follow if the state doesn't comply soon. With the clock ticking, everyone is watching to see whether California will finally enforce the rules, or continue risking both funding and safety. Next, we'll explore what this could mean for everyday drivers on California highways and why this showdown matters to the general public, not just truckers. The battle over English proficiency enforcement in California isn't just a bureaucratic dispute. It's a story about safety, money, and accountability. $40 million in federal funding is on the line, truck drivers' livelihoods are at risk, and everyday motorists could face serious consequences if unqualified drivers remain on the road. Some say California is protecting its workforce, while others argue the state is ignoring a clear safety requirement. With deadlines looming and tensions escalating between Sacramento and Washington, the coming weeks could decide the fate of federal funding and the standard for road safety in the nation's most populous state. So, will California finally enforce the rules and secure the money? Or will political debates and slow action put everyone at risk? The answer could impact drivers, families, and the future of trucking across the U.S. Stay tuned, because what happens next may shock you, and it could set a precedent for the entire country.